Coming up on Arirang News, the South Korean government will start making coronavirus emergency relief payments to all households starting May 13th. Amounts differ, but a household of 4 will be getting about $800. South Korea has enough face masks to let everyone buy up to 3 a week from public retailers like the post office. In fact, it's going to send 1 million masks overseas to foreign veterans as a gesture of thanks for their service in the Korean War. And with coronavirus lockdowns threatening the employment of hundreds of millions of people around the world, the labor ministers of the G20 countries pledged to mitigate the effect on jobs and support workers in need. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The supply of face masks in South Korea seems to be stabilizing. So starting next week, when people go to public retailers like the post office, they'll be able to buy 3 masks a week instead of 2. The South Korean government will also be sending 1 million face masks overseas to foreign veterans who fought in the Korean War. Oh Jung-hee reports.
Starting next week, ordinary citizens will be able to buy 3 masks every week, an increase from the current 2 per week. Speaking at a government response meeting on Friday, South Korea's Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun said that there will be a greater need for masks as people gradually resume economic activities. Under the public mass distribution system, which has been running since March, South Korean citizens have been able to purchase 2 masks from public suppliers like pharmacies on their designated day of the week. South Korea will also send 1 million masks to foreign war veterans who fought in the Korean War, as this year marks 70 years since the outbreak of the war. The government will seek national consensus in choosing where to send masks, and domestic supply will be taken into account. These come as the government believes the country's supply of masks has been stabilized thanks to the mass distribution system. Starting next week, South Korea will also use electronic wristbands to help check on people in self-isolation. Those who are told to self-isolate but deliberately do not receive calls from local government officials will have to wear this band. Connected to the smartphone quarantine application, the wristband detects movements, receives calls, and traces the wearer's location. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea will be providing coronavirus emergency relief payments to all households starting May 13th. The presidential office said Friday that the government will start accepting applications on May 11th. However, those in the lowest income bracket will be eligible starting May 4th, assuming that the National Assembly passes an extra budget to fund the plan by next Wednesday, April 29th. The size of the payment differs, but for a household of 4, it would be 1 million won, or about $800. The payments are for all households, but the plan includes a scheme to encourage high-income earners to voluntarily return the payments. Originally, the government was going to make the payments only to households whose combined income is in the lower 70%, but this was expanded under a deal with the ruling party. The labor ministers of the G20 countries met on Thursday to discuss ways to mitigate the global impact of COVID-19 on jobs and on society in general. A number of countries, including South Korea and the U.S., are facing historic levels of unemployment. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The COVID-19 pandemic has led to an unprecedented challenge that requires a coordinated global response. This is the first line of the G20 Labor and Employment Ministers' statement issued on Thursday, after the ministers discussed ways to cope with the virus's impact on employment across the world. According to the G20 labor ministers, they will come together to develop and implement comprehensive and effective measures to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on both the domestic and global labor markets and societies, adding that fighting and overcoming the pandemic is their highest and overriding priority. The labor ministers also emphasized that in addition to protecting jobs and income, they will work to ensure social protection systems are sufficiently robust and adaptable to provide adequate support for all workers in need, regardless of their employment status, age, or gender. The task will be tough, as a number of major economies are facing some of the worst unemployment numbers they've ever witnessed. This includes South Korea, which reported its first on-year job loss since the global financial crisis in 2009. South Korea lost some 195,000 jobs last month, marking the sharpest monthly decline since May 2009, when it saw some 240,000 job losses. In addition, the number of employed people taking temporary leave surged by 1.23 million to 1.6 million in April, the sharpest rise since 1983. In the U.S., more than 4.4 million workers filed for unemployment benefits this week as job cuts continue to soar across an economy that remains all but shut down. Since the COVID-19 outbreak in the U.S. began forcing employers to close their businesses, some 26 million people have filed for jobless aid in the past 5 weeks alone. That's about 1 in 6 American workers who have lost their jobs since mid-March, the worst wave of layoffs on record. Experts predict the U.S. unemployment rate for April could go as high as 20%. 이승재, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, global strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you as always for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, stocks on Wall Street were mixed on Thursday. On the one hand, oil prices recovered from their historic lows, but then there was the failure of a trial treatment for the coronavirus. What's the story there?
Yes, as you said, market's been pretty much volatile throughout the Thursday session. And it actually closed at pretty much flat. If you look at the Dow Jones, it gained very slightly by about 0.2%. S&P was slightly down by 0.1%, and NASDAQ was pretty much flat. As you said, the reason for that is because we had seen some recoveries on the oil price. WTI futures June delivery contract soared more than 20%, and it settled at $16.5 per barrel. And also we see the Brent prices all going up as well. But we were seeing these numbers related to the economic numbers. The Labor Department showed that another 4.4 million workers filed for the jobless benefits last week, and bringing the 5 weeks total to 26 million, which is about 15% of total workers. Of course, the 4 weeks average is around 5 million, so we're not going to see that entire 26 million all being unemployed. But nevertheless, this is a bit of a troublesome, as these numbers are pretty much the same as the gains of new jobs since the 2008 financial crisis. And also, it related to the Gilead stocks. The company gave a promising yet inconclusive assessment regarding the treatment, remdesivir, to treat the coronavirus infections. So it was pretty much mixed in terms of the U.S. market.
Right. Well, Korean stocks closed quite a bit lower today. Both the Kospi and the Kosdaq down well over 1%. Why is that?
Yes, as you said, Korean market was down about 1.3% for Kospi and 1.7% for Kosdaq. I think there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one is because there was rumor in regards to the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un being seriously ill, and he really has not shown up his face yet to the public. So there's quite a lot of doubts and a lot of speculations are floating around right now because it's not really confirmed that he's not seriously ill. So because of that, equity markets were taking quite a bit of a hit ever since last Tuesday. I think this is still lingering around for the last several days. And also the second reason is that Korea's GDP numbers came in at quite a significant decline from the previous quarter. It's showing about 1.4% Q-on-Q decline, which is troublesome. And also this is followed through for the second quarter is that the export numbers are even worse. It is showing 27% drop year-on-year numbers for first 20 days of April. So all these things are putting a pressure on the Korean equity market. However, though, we're continuing to see additional money inflow to the equity market. Retail investors are continuing net buyer of Korean equity market. Today, they were still buying another 700 billion won worth of equities. Every day, a similar amount of monies are actually piling into Korean equities. So quite a bit of a strong support in terms of the overall equity market at this point in time.
Well, now the Korean won has weakened a fair bit against the U.S. dollar, and the price of gold, meanwhile, continues to rise. What's your outlook for the exchange rate and the so-called safe havens?
Right. If you look at the recent U.S. dollar movement, it seems to show quite a bit of a strength. We saw it recover back to above $100 index. And if you look at today, it's going up slightly again to about 100.9. So because of that, we are seeing some residual implication for the cost Korea's won. And the Korean won has depreciated quite significantly to 1241 on the day when the Kim Jong-un issue was hitting the market. It kind of stabilized, but still, nevertheless, it is moving a bit of a depreciation territories. Right now, it's around 1236 level. We think, though, with the U.S. continue to inject liquidities, and significant amount of liquidity means that dollar probably will no longer strengthen in the future. It probably should moderately depreciate it over the period of time. If that's the case, we do think that the Korean won should stabilize at around 1,200 level. Right now it's at 1236. So we do think that over the next probably several weeks or so, Korean won should be stabilizing anywhere between 1,200 to 1,240 range. So we are probably on the high end of it. As for the gold prices, the safety measures are really kicking in here. As I've said, there's a huge amount of liquidity injections given by the Fed at this point in time. If you look at the Fed balance sheet increase, and if you look at the money supply growth rate and the level of the MO and M1 growth rate, it is ridiculously high. And because of that, what that means is that the value of currency should depreciate in a global scale, not just U.S. dollars, but all around the countries. If you look at every central banks, they're basically pumping money, printing money, and using a very aggressive monetary policy. If that's the case, then the supplementary so-called gold, the supplementary assets should continue to gain interest. And if you compare that to 2008 numbers, gold hit 1920 at the peak of the gold prices. Right now, it is at around 1750 range. So we do think that there's more room for gold to appreciate in the future, as long as coronavirus impact making all the central banks continue to print money.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks for coming on today, and have a great weekend.
Great. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Now, South Korean auto giant Kia Motors saw net profit in the first quarter drop 59% from a year earlier, coming in at around $215 million because of COVID-19's impact on production and sales. Kia expects the pandemic will have a bigger impact on sales in the second quarter. Meanwhile, South Korean steelmaker POSCO posted a net profit of around $350 million, down more than 44% from a year earlier. The pandemic's hit global demand for steel in industries like car manufacturing and construction. Now, South Korea's tourism industry has taken a huge blow from the coronavirus, and it's looking to turn things around as soon as it can. But that might not be welcome news, as our Lee Kyung-eun reports.
Insadong, located in Seoul's central Jongno-gu district, used to be bustling with foreign travelers wearing hanbok, South Korea's traditional attire. However, given the specter of COVID-19, the streets are now eerily empty.
Last year, we usually had up to 300 visitors a week, with 95% of them being foreigners. These days, we see no foreigners and only about 10 locals.
Since April, the average number of daily entrants at Incheon International Airport is around 4,500, down more than 95% on year. Outbound travelers have also dropped dramatically, just over 1,100, which is only about 1% of last year's record. With that, the industry is enduring an unprecedented crisis. Travel agencies, including the country's two largest companies, Hanator and Motor, have shifted to 3-day working schedules and are encouraging workers to take paid leave.
Tourism is a web of highly interconnected businesses, so even if the situation is safe here, if things are not the same elsewhere, we won't have travelers going overseas, nor do we receive them.
With some $1.9 billion of losses expected so far this year, the Culture Ministry has injected emergency support to help the businesses.
Up to April 20th, we helped 3,099 companies maintain their employees by providing $1,700 each for those who registered.
Now, with the upcoming holiday in May, the industry is faced with yet another dilemma. Business is picking up in some of the most popular tourist hotspots in the country, like the southern island of Jeju and the eastern resort town of Gangneung, with hotels there seeing over 80% reservation rates. But the return of visitors could mean hurting past efforts to contain the virus amid lingering fears about COVID-19. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.